Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Ream Library at the College of the Holy Cross. I'm Brent Otto. I'm Global Catholicism Fellow in the McFarland Center for Religion, Ethics, and Culture. The McFarland Center sponsors lectures, discussions, conferences, and conversations which foster dialogue on questions of meaning, morality, and mutual obligation, as well as initiatives to foster Jewish-Christian understanding and deepen our awareness of Catholicism in its global dimensions. Welcome to the second lecture in the McFarland Center's fall series, Catholic Resistance Against Authoritarianism. In a world of rising authoritarian regimes, we examine, in history and in the present, at home and abroad, Catholic responses to injustice and repression. This afternoon, we turn our attention to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where authoritarian state power has often been seized by leaders unaccountable to the people. Yet, Congolese Catholics have resisted by appealing to a higher divine authority and by embodying alternative forms of political legitimacy through Bantu philosophy, evangelical witness, and courageous lay movements confronting the Leviathan-State. This struggle raises pressing questions. Why should a handful of individuals hold a monopoly on violence? And is the state merely one possible human arrangement among many others? We are fortunate to have with us Emmanuel Bueya, Bu-Makaya, a Jesuit priest and professor of philosophy at the Université Loyola du Congo, currently serving at Holy Cross as our International Visiting Jesuit Fellow in the McFarland Center for this academic year. This talk is the Center's way of introducing Emmanuel to the Holy Cross community, and we are very pleased that it could be an integral part of our series on Catholic resistance to authoritarianism. Emmanuel is the 36th Jesuit Fellow of the McFarland Center, the latest in a long line of Jesuits bringing an international perspective in many diverse disciplines to the intellectual community of Holy Cross. Interested students, mine and others, please take note and look for Father Emmanuel's class offered in the Political Science Department in the spring semester. During Emmanuel's graduate studies at Leicester and then at Boston College, Emmanuel wrote on U.S. diplomacy in the stability of African states. His first book, Stability in Post-Colonial African States, published in 2017 by Lexington, he argues that stability is not the product of the power of the state exerting total control over its territory. Rather, it arises from the harmonious management of the contact of solidarity among citizens, both in decision-making and in power sharing for the well-being of all. Emmanuel's second monograph project, which the Jesuit Fellowship Program helps to enable, is on the role of papal diplomacy in promoting peace building in the eastern DRC. Today, he will speak to us on state power versus people's sovereignty, Catholic resistance to authoritarianism in the DRC. After his talk, there will be time for questions, either spontaneous or, if you prefer, I will come around with index cards for those who would rather write out their question in advance. Please join me right now in welcoming Father Emmanuel Bueya this afternoon.
Thank you, Father Brian, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you for everyone for coming here, for giving us your time. Now, before I start, I'd like really to precise the objective of our talk, so that at the end of this meeting, if they ask you the question, what was the talk about, maybe you can be able really to summarize. I would like really to invite you to think about Africa, especially about DRC. Usually when you read the newspaper or the media, when they talk about DRC, always it's a very negative way. War, poverty, which is true, but not completely true. So today, after this conversation, really, I would like you to be able really to understand that Congo, there is two faces. a land of abundance and a land also of scarcity of means, a land of authoritarianism, but also a land of struggle where people with faith are struggling for justice and for peace. Now, that's what the title today is State, Power, People's Sovereignty. In other words, in three parts of the conversation, at the beginning, I'll present Congo as a space where there is a paradox of abundance, but also paradox of misery. The second point will be really to see the history of authoritarianism in the DRC, starting with King Paul Leopold until the current president today. And the third part will be really to see how Africans, or in very specific way, Congolese are struggling really for justice, for peace, for democracy. So, as I said, this is the outline of the conversation. Once again, I insist, please look at the outline so that we can keep something. The first will be just to see the paradox of the country. The second will be the models of authoritarianism. And the last point is to see the Catholic resistance. Now, before I start, maybe to ask how many of you have ever been to Africa in general, maybe to Congo, to be specific. Thank you. One. So to start, maybe I'd like to present the country in the map, because for some people, when they talk about Africa, Africa is a country. Meanwhile, Africa is a continent with 55 countries. So this is the map of Africa and of Congo. But this is the Mercator projection. You know the Mercator projection. It has a very, very biased understanding of the countries here. So you see Congo is there at the center of Africa. And there we have also the Congo with 9 neighbor countries. But the most important to keep in mind is the territory itself is 2 million kilometers square. And the population, we are more than 110 million. And talking about ethnic group, we are many, more than 400 ethnic groups, and the languages, you have 200 languages. Each ethnic group has its own specific language, and they try to put them together in order to have at least 5 national, we call them national languages. So this is really the map of the continent, but maybe it doesn't mean nothing for you. Let us try to put that map of Congo within Europe to see how big DRC is. When you look at the map, really, DRC can cover France, Germany, Poland, and many other countries. So it's very, very huge to understand really the geostrategic position of DRC. Now, this is Europe. Maybe you are not familiar with Europe. Let us try to see in America where we can put really DRC. If we try to put DRC in America and see, it takes many states in Africa. So to have the view that it's a big country and very crucial in terms of geopolitics in Africa. This is now the map of Africa. Now, the first point, as I said, remember what I said, it's a very paradoxal country. On one side, abundance, and the other side, really, poverty and misery. Let us start with the positive side of wealth of DRC. As you can see, talking about in terms of forest, the country DRC has 45% of Africa's equatorial forest, and almost 6% of the world's tropical reserve, 1,000 species of tree varieties, and in terms of hydropower potential, 100,000 megawatt. And you can continue in terms of half of Africa's water resources are in Congo, and in terms of arable land, 80 million hectares. So as you can see, it's a land of abundance, and when you go there, you can see that God has blessed this country with many resources, so to speak. In the same line, talking in terms of really mineral resources, there are many in DRC. Cobalt, 70% of the world's cobalt reserve are in DRC. You know? And it's very crucial because today they are more talking about electrical vehicles, and there is a big demand in terms of cobalt there. So there you can see the other side, really, Kwango is a region, and Sankuru is a region. Each region has a very specific mineral resources there. You have also diamonds, a lot in Kasai and many places, tantalum, lithium, uranium, manganese, gold. But This is also, as I put there, cost resources. Why? Because today, when you look at your cell phone, you have this battery of cell phone. They use a coltan, as you can see, and the demand is very high today. That high demand makes people work very hard in the field there, and it brings a lot of problem. Coltan is a key source of the conflict in the Congo. It's a mineral widely used in many electronic devices like cell phone, computers, and game console. Tantalum, niobium, ore. Now, since the demand is very high, what happened that it brings not really, actually wealth is supposed to bring really happiness, but in Congo it's the contrary. There's a book here written by one of the American journalists. The title is Cobalt Red. The subtitle is How the Blood of the Congo's Powers Our Life. If you have time to read the book, you can see those people of Congolese working really to get that and to sell them. So the consequence is, since there is a lot of demand and the greed of people, there are many group armed there, more than 100 armed groups in the DRC, fighting to get a piece of land and to sell those cobalt, tantalum, niobium, and many others. That's the first wealth, but with a lot of trouble. The other side is the failed state. When you say failed state, really the management of these resources are not very well done, to the extent that 74% of the DRC population live on less than $2, or in other words, 1 of 6 Congolese live in extreme poverty. You know, those who have studied political science, they know there are many theories. This theory of resources cost says that the failure of a country, in this case of DRC, to benefit fully from its natural resources wealth, the failure of the government to respond effectively to public welfare needs. Now, the explanation is given saying that no, it's because of the natural resources. Those natural resources have become really the reason why there's a conflict, because different groups fight to control those resources. But it's not true. That's why we have to understand that the main cause of the problem is not really resources by themselves, no, but the way we manage them, or in other words, it's about authoritarian power in the DRC. So those are some books trying to explain for those who are students to understand really, to go from facts, a reflection to make. When states fail, this is Robert Rothbard. He's right, but not completely right, because it just focuses on the role of the state, which is important, yes, but in Africa, there's more than the state. There's always a community. Now, there is another book from a true professor from MIT, Why Nation Fails. They try to analyze Africa, but from the beginning, the premises are not very good. There is this one also who wrote, for him, you think that as Brandt explained at the beginning, the state must have the power to control the territory in order to have peace and stability. But my theory is quite different. My book, The Stability on Post-Colonial African State, I think that's, first of all, there is a matter of social contract between the citizens. And the question asked, why should a handful of individuals be granted a monopoly on violence? Is not the state they represent merely one of the forms of human organization among many others? In other words, the state cannot be really the end in any society. The state is one of the forms human beings come together and before the state, you have empires, you have kingdoms. So let us really think that we are not state being. We are first of all social being. That's my position. So that was the second point. The first point, in general, Congo, abundance, really a lot of resources, but it brings trouble to the extent that people are very poor and there's war there. That war still continues today, war over those resources. If you have a phone, just remember that in your phone there is a coltan taladite, which is used and which is brought from also Africa. Now, the second point, it's about really the model of authoritarianism. Now, I would like to give a very historical view about authoritarianism in Congo. Congo, it's a country in a very modern way, but in a traditional way, it's not yet a country today. In other words, the notion of state, it's an important notion. It's not really working very well for many reasons. Let us see now how. At the beginning, when the country started, it was King Paul II, you know the story, I think. At the beginning, he just called the conference. It's called Conference of Berlin, or Berlin Conference. The goal of the conference, he said, no, let us come, we'll do research about Africa in order to bring them civilization. But it was not true. It was not to bring civilization. When they came, they just share the Africa, the scramble for Africa. He took DRC, and at the beginning, he was doing a business of gold and ivory. After that business, the invention of the wheel, that was the second moment for his business. The invention of the wheel required rubber. And in order to have that rubber, you have to have plantation. So the whole country, Africa, became just a rubber plantation. All the people in Africa, the indigenous were forced really to produce that rubber. Everyone, every day, has to produce 7 or 8 liters of rubber. If you don't, you'll cut your hand. That's what you see there. People have hand cuts because they were not able really to produce the rubber for the wheel. So it was really a big massacre. That's the beginning of this totalitarian or authoritarian system which continues today in DRC, really the exploitation of resources. At the beginning, it was really rubber. So we have many books for those who would like to read. We have Belgian Atrocity in Congo, Du sang sur les lianes in French, or the other one written by, I think, an American, King's Paul Ghost. Now, it was so brutally cruel that he was obliged really to sold the country, which was his property, to Belgium. The Belgian state took the country, and they did also the same. Instead of maybe exploiting rubber, they started to exploit copper, even uranium. And it was really so tough, so difficult at the end that the indigenous people started really to rebel, and the independence came. That independence was in 1991. Since you're talking about resistance, one of the heroes of that resistance was Lumumba. Lumumba, the day of the independence, that one is the grandson of the king, Roi Baudouin. He came in DRC for the proclamation of the independence. That day, Lumumba said, "You have seen our land seized in the name of ostensibly just laws, which gave recognition only to the mighty, to the right of mighty." That was the day of the independence. 30th of June, I think, 1960. He's there, Lumumba. So that was really a mistake for him, because after that he was arrested. He was a prime minister, actually. He was arrested and then put in prison. Before he died, he wrote a letter which is well known in DRC. He said, "History will one day have its says, but it not be the history written in Brussels, Paris, Washington, but from Africa." That was the prophecy. So when you read really the evolution of that authoritarian system in DRC, after the King Leopold went, and the Africans or Congolese tried to fight in order to get the freedom, independence, Lumumba had that project really to have a great country in DRC. It didn't work. The CIA, which was well implanted there for geostrategic reasons, as you know, there was a time of Cold War, and great power didn't want really Africa being taken by the communism. That's why they need people really to prevent communism, which was already present in Angola, Namibia, and many other countries. They have Mobutu. Mobutu was the agent of the CIA. You have this book, a very interesting book. You can learn really foreign policy of the United States during that time. So they put Mobutu as the president of the country, and he was not a good man, Mobutu. So when he came, once again, authoritarianism with this president, what he did, he suppressed freedoms and the right of Congolese people, reducing multi-party politics into one single, the MPR. And he became very rich, people become very poor. At the end of the Cold War, he was no longer useful for the great people. So as you can see here, he helped to eliminate Lumumba, who was his mentor, actually. And then he was used really by the Western power to be like a shield for the advancement of communism in Central Africa. So he has the entire support of Western, but he was crashing with people, he was just oppressing and killing. It was really terrible, but outside he was really welcome. As you can see, you have Kennedy there, you have, I think, Nixon here, you have there Bush there, and there Ronald Reagan. So he was really a good friend of them, but in the country, no, he was really a horror, a terrible man. As here you have 4 people, he just hung them in public. This was in 1966. So he called people, they came, and then he hung them in public. That was really horrible to the extent that people were afraid. He became just a dictator. So that was the day he hung them there. It's called the Palais du Peuple. So there are many books written about him. He's there. He became a marshal, the last rank in the army. So this is authoritarian regime, someone produced by the CIA in the DRC. He has really the favor of the Western country, but in the country, he was really horrible, like Leopold himself. So you have those books, Dinosaur and In the Foot of Mr. Kurz. Now, after the end of the Cold War, he was no longer useful for the Western power. So, as you can see, maybe you may know this one, Bill Richardson was the ambassador of the United States to the United Nations. He came to Congo, he told them, look, this is the end of the Cold War. Just leave because you are no longer useful. But he didn't want, so the American just armed the other men, Kabila, who is this side, to help to remove Mobutu. So he was removed. But as you can see, after 30 years, when a system is really, really grounded somewhere, to remove it can bring really chaos and trouble and many problems. So what happened, that effort to change the regime, there was war. There are many books you can read. This Africa World's War, 16 countries came to DRC to fight against Mobutu, for Mobutu, the Great African War, or even Jason wrote a book, Dancing in the Glory of Monsters. So monsters, those are Lord of War, or Holocaust in Congo, really Holocaust. Because with Leopold, 10 million died from this really colonialism at that time. But in this war, more than 6 million have died. Now, there are many ways of interpreting that history to avoid the competition of memories. I think one of the best books to understand really the situation or the root cause, but also the interpretation of is to read the book of Paul Ricoeur, Memory, History, and Forgetting, for those who are interested to go beyond the facts and then try to reflect about the situation. So Kabila took power, but it didn't last because when he took power, he changed completely. You want to work for the country. You want really that the resources of the country must belong to the Congolese. As you can see, they killed him. He was assassinated. And when he was assassinated, another chaos in Congo, so the trouble. His son became president. He was very young. He was 29, as you can see, a young face. And he promised also, he said in French, he said, okay, I'm taking the power, but just for 5 years. After 5 years, I'll leave because I'm a soldier. I'm not really a politician. And I'll not touch the constitution. That was a promise. But once in power, really, he became himself the state, as you can see. That's why I'm very reluctant about the notion of the state. It's just an important notion. When it comes to Africa, the state, with this kind of people, the state is him, because he has the monopoly of violence, he has really the economy in his hand, he has the army, the police, everything. So, and the people are just silent and crushed. So, and after 5 years of election, he goes to election, but always they were rigged election. He always win. Meanwhile, in reality, he was losing. So, and I remember in 2017, I was working in one of the Jesuit center, social center there. There were many mass graves, people killed in Ituri, in Makobola, in so many places, to the extent that we can say that Congo became an open-air grave, because, and you can see he's smiling, and with the beard like Leopold II, so it's a very sad story. Now, after that, at the end of his term as a president, he has to leave, but he didn't want to leave. So 1 year after, he obliged really to do election. We did election. He has a candidate, a favorite candidate, who didn't win. The one who won was Fayulu, but that happened only in Africa. He just put another person, this one, to be the president, and it was the current president now. It's really chaos, because for the past 7 years, an elected president has ruled the Congo. So in 7 years, the public debt of the Congo has increased from 5 billion to 14 billion, just to show how it's a kind of chronic of corruption, mismanagement, and the concentration of power in the hands of one person. So as you can see, we are talking about authoritarianism here. It's real. People are put aside. They cannot speak. They cannot really act. And we have people just come to power, seize the power, and do whatever they want, neglecting the constitution. But mostly, they have the support of some Western countries, so to speak. So that's the second point. Now, those are the facts. Those who would like to read books about really reflection, that there are many books. I just took some of them. This one, for example, Criminalization of the State in Africa, where you can read how in DRC, Central Africa, really, the state is a kind of a property in the hand of oligarchy of people just using. And the necropolitics, this is Achille Bembe using the philosophy of Michel Foucault to explain governmentality and the notion of command and obedience, so to speak. And there you have the shadow of the state about really how. Remember I said at the beginning that in Africa, in Congo, we have more than 400 ethnic groups. How ethnic groups can come together to constitute a state? It's very difficult. And that book, The State in Africa, this is a very French historiography and a way of understanding politics in Africa. It's about patrimonialism. But the most interesting book maybe can be The Imported State once again. The notion of state. What is a state? How come that the president is there, will give him power of everything, doing everything? Even he can change the constitution, he can become really the author of the criminal courts. So if we have to summarize really authoritarianism in Africa, or also in many other countries, usually they divide. They have a rhetoric of division, of really demonizing, and always to lie in the conspiracy in DRC. In DRC, we don't follow the official news because we know that it's always propaganda and lying. So to destroy check and balance, to demonize opponents. I showed you how Mobutu just hung those politicians in public, to undermine civil and political rights of the online, to reward a royalist. Yeah, if you're a good friend, then you're close to him. But if you betrayed him, and you just die. So, and the last, maybe most important, usually in an authoritarian system, they make people feel like they are powerless to change things, and that's what we see in Africa. People are trying to come together to struggle, but they are just hopeless. So we spend time to criticize. No, not to spend time to criticize. Usually we criticize, and I think it's everywhere. When you look at really how state can be so powerful, can be so oppressive that people can criticize, but they feel just powerless, as in this case. So here it's just the distinction that we can have a democratic government and soft authoritarian and autocratic. So you can see, but now even democracy, you have now populism, all of that. So I can see that authoritarianism is everywhere. Depending on the degree of that and how it works, depending on the culture. But in Congo, that's brutal and very bad. Now, those who are interested in political philosophy, there are many books put their authors, but Hannah Arendt can explain very well. But even Hannah Arendt there, you can see he has a very interesting chapter about the Horero of Namibia, as the beginning of genocide of this Horero by the Germans who are colonized Namibia. But he doesn't consider Horero as a human being normal. Okay, normal, I put it in brackets. So you read that, you see that it's very deep, really, understanding of the beginning of authoritarianism or colonialism, but it doesn't go very far because the way of seeing people is quite different. I don't know the difference between a Horero and a Jewish. So, but it's a very interesting book in order to understand really. And I think it's from the school of Frankfurt School. Adorno also rewrote the authoritarian personality. So that was the second part. So to summarize the second part, I showed you the history of DRC. When you look at the history of DRC, from King Leopold to the last president, it's always massacre, killing. With Leopold, 10 million people just died. This war today is 6 million. And people are almost tired, really. Congo, they kill each other every day. So let us move and see others. So Gaza is quite interesting, but because, and Ukraine is interesting, but Congo there, they used to kill each other. But you know that it's not the case. It's kind of a system which is there from the beginning, which doesn't change. Even the notion of the state, really, is not well understood in terms of really, actually the definition of Max Weber, monopoly of violence. Why monopoly of violence? We can create a state where people come together in order to build a community of sharing and living together. So that was the second point. The last one now, that's where the response can be, how Catholics react to this dictatorship and oppression and As you can see, the Congolese people have been fighting against the theft of the wealth, dictatorship of Mobutu, Kabila. I know this young man, his name is Luke, and you remember the day they took him that way. We are marching, protesting in Kinshasa. So there's a very interesting book also, the Noam Chomsky, I think. The title of the book, Profit Over People, and the subtitle is Neoliberalism and Global Order, where he's trying to describe really this global economic system of today and how it's crashing some countries like ours, always from Leopold to the Belgium. Today, now the DRC continue to be dominated by exploitation and oppression at the hands of powerful Congolese oligarchy and the multinational corporation. And when you talk about multinational corporation, they are very powerful. I can give you the example of Tenke Fungurume. Tenke Fungurume, it's in Katanga. It's like a state within a state. And the way they exploit it really, it's quite interesting. But Congolese react. Congo is not for sale. So this is an example maybe to see. I hope some of you have heard about Washington Agreement. What is all about Washington Agreement? It's the current American government, they said, look, you people are fighting each other, you don't have to fight. Come in Washington, we'll have an agreement. After that agreement, we'll do a kind of economic integration for business. So they came, you can see there, the Prime Minister of, no, not Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda, the Vice President, and Mark Rubio, and the President, and our Minister of Affairs of DRC. So they did the agreement, but we know what is beyond there. Well, as you can see, in Africa, it's kind of a scramble for Africa. China is there. China have started what is called the belt of, not remember belt, and yes, and then when they did that, Joe Biden also came in DRC. It's called Corridor Lobito. They take really from Rwanda, and it just cross the DRC into Luanda, and then it goes. So as you can see, it's not really for peace, but how can we take also our part like did Leopold in the past? So Chinese Belt Road Initiative. So they did that. It was wonderful. And we were very happy. They said, oh, that's the end of really conflict in DRC. But it's not the end. They continue. And the bishop, the cardinal of the DRC of Kinshasa, criticized a little bit. He said that deal doesn't address the root cause of the conflict. It's not about really coming together and sharing the resources. No. It's about really how can we live together despite our differences. Can we find a kind of overlapping consensus so that we can be a community able really to deal with conflict so as you can see, that example doesn't show very well how to proceed. Let us see now how Catholics handle the situation. Now, for the Catholic, you can take it at the two levels. The first one in terms of principles, and the second one being on the ground, what they did. In terms of principle, we know the Catholic social teaching. The Catholic social teaching, we put it on one side, in this Catholic social teaching, here, authoritarianism. When you look at the Catholic social teaching, for them, or for us Catholics, those who are Catholic, every human person is created in the image of God and possesses inherent dignity that no government authority can take away. But for the authoritarian, they always dehumanize. You have seen the pictures of Leopold cutting really hands of people and transforming peaceful people into a commodity. So we can see. But in Catholic Church, I think everyone is the image of God. The second principle, the promotion of common good. Catholic political ethics promote a society that benefits all its members and reject policies rooted in self-interest and divisiveness. That's the case of capitalism. It's always mine. But for Catholic, I think we share because we are brothers and sisters. And the third principle of the Catholic solidarity of the vulnerable, it's about really interconnectedness and mutual responsibility. The poor, the marginalized, and the oppressed is a brother who is not maybe fortunate to, and I have to help him. My hand is made really in order to help, not in order to fight. So, which is completely different from the authoritarian system where it's always really you are on your own, so to speak. So our faith calls us to solidarity with the poor and most vulnerable in our communities. Those are the principles now that the Catholic can explain how the Catholics see the situation, how they go. It's not like a politician who look at, where's my interest, where's my economic need? No, for the Catholic, they are human beings. How can we approach them and help them to solve the situation. Those are the principles. Now, on the ground, how did it work? Let us start with Leopold. When Leopold was doing those real atrocities in the DRC, the Holy See reacted. And also this bishop from France, Bishop Aguiar, to denounce atrocities like a mutilation of Congolese people and severe abuse during this regime. So we can see there, they were writing really with a document showing how those columns were just, he's holding a cat hand. So it was horrible. There are many books about that. You look at them, difficult. The second dictator was Mobutu. Mobutu, remember what I said, at the end of his reign in DRC, he was no longer used for the Western, so they just reject him. And people took the opportunity really to say, okay, let us come together to have a national conference there, so that we can try to see what are our problems, how can we solve them to rebuild a new society. But Mobutu didn't agree. So these days, I remember I was still in philosophy. After Mass, we went out in order to walk, to protest for the reopening of the national conference. Mobutu just sent soldiers and they killed many. But anyway, my point is just to see that the Catholics just walk in order, they are not afraid of authoritarian. They do what they can because they believe that God is more powerful than those human beings. Actually, he didn't die in DRC, Mobutu. He flew and then he died in Morocco. He's buried somewhere. So meanwhile, he was president for 32 years in DRC. The third president was Kabila. Kabila finished his term, but he didn't want really to leave. So Catholic also said, no, you have to respect the constitution. So as you can see, he's a priest, he's a nun. So it was after Mass. I remember this was in 2017. After Mass, we said, okay, after Mass, you are going to march in order to express our dissatisfaction. The president must change, must leave. But he sent also soldiers and policemen to kill. As you can see here, it's a Marian grotto in the parish that I know. Those are just blood. It was really horrible. So as you can see, Catholic Church has been a vocal critic of government policies that infringe human freedom. But they are also able really to mobilize the people in order to protest against corruption in governance and rigged election. And this was one of the protests. They were protesting because they want to balkanize the country, and we came together with, and when we protest, it's not really that we shout, no, we just walk with rosary, singing, and praying that God may bless again DRC so that we may have at least peace. But when we do that, what happened? This happened. This was in Kinshasa. We always face the soldiers just ready to kill, and they do. They kill. So, okay. So the third now, as I said, we are Catholic. We are our actions are rooted in that spirituality of the gospel. But also, as an African, we have this philosophy of Ubuntu. I saw some pictures there, the grassroots where they wrote Ubuntu hospitality. We think that one of the big problems in Africa, especially in DRC, is not that people are not able to come together and to live peacefully. No. One of them is capitalism. This capitalism meaning here someone coming with money and military forces, grab the land, to exploit the land, and just to transform the people into commodities, as you can see. Leopold did it, and many powers came there, using our president Mobutu, Kabila, to do the same. Now, in order really to resist, since we are talking about resistance against authoritarian, what we bring to resist, we bring just humanism, meaning that philosophy of considering each person as an image of God. And there is a Nelson Mandela will try to explain a little bit how does it understand Ubuntu, which has become...
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us.
Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
Thank you. So, as I said, Ubuntu is the philosophy of those people who were surprised to see state coming and industry coming. Capitalism has reduced villages to space of exploitation, and the free indigenous people have become colonial subjects, turned into commodities. The bonds of brotherhood have been broken and replaced by chains of production, exploitation, contract, and profit. There is a need to resist this dehumanization. And how? Sorry, I have some problem here. So I was explaining really the Ubuntu as a way for people to resist to authoritarianism. And when you look at really how people in Congo, for example, we are talking about Catholic, when they go to church, they sing a lot. African Congolese rite is a mass where it can last 2 hours, 3 hours. It doesn't mean that people don't have anything to do after mass. No, it is just a place where really they become themselves, to be reborn and to share that joy of living and to forget those brutalities and atrocities and suffering. It's a place where really they feel that we are connected to each other, that we are brothers and sisters, that God is present amid this suffering and we can really be redeemed despite the situation. So that's why the Congolese find this humanism very important. Interconnectedness, community, empathy, shared sense of humanity. I am because we are. And Mandela said also in Africa there is the concept known as Ubuntu, the profound sense that we are human only through the humanity of others. That if we are to accomplish anything in this world, it is in equal measure be due to the work and the achievement of others, which is true. So once again, when you look at really the history of the DRC, really, the way charismatic leaders were against real domination, were against and worked for human rights. But there is this interesting book, The Congo Plunder and Resistance, which can show how people were not the passive victim. They were trying really from their faith and from their ethics of Ubuntu to resist to that. But also as a Christian, we have the gospel of the Lord, where Jesus said, have come that they may have life in abundance. Jesus came also to announce the good news of salvation to the poor, liberation to the oppressed. And also we understand the cross as the cross which frees us from sin and death. But also to be a disciple of Christ means that we have to obey, not to King Leopold or to Mobutu or Kabila, no, first of all, to God. And for those who are interested in African theology, there are two very interesting books for Jean-Marc Ela, a Cameroonian theologian. He wrote African Cry. When we read that book, we can see really the cry of African from colonialism, neocolonialism, imperialism, rigged election, poverty, underdevelopment, all those questions. But not only that, my faith as an African, how we respond to that, how we live our faith as a Christian, how to talk about Catholic resistance, we resisted to that suffering and the situation. So those are the books. Now, in conclusion, just one sentence. We are all social beings, first of all. And those who are interested in literature, there's a very interesting book of Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, where the main character, Okonkwo, sees African falling apart and something else was being replaced. And we can summarize it. Yesterday, community life, I think community life, for the case of a DRC, is the response to that situation, really. Yesterday, they were free in our village. Some villages, they are still free. And this is true. Sometimes in the village, you can see Chinese coming with machine and big cars and come, oh, we have bought this land, you have to leave. Ah, how come? You know, they have the contract with the state. So that's why for me, the state, I don't know how to understand the state, but yesterday they were free in the village, but today they are prisoners and of an exploitative system that dehumanize them. We are docile body, it's the expression of Michel Foucault, in a market of profit where everything is for sale. We must return to what we are ontologically, human beings and not commercial commodities. Land and community are essential and fundamental. How? The capitalist view of the land as a commodity for sale must first be deconstructed and replaced with an emphasis on the ancestral value of land that centers the well-being of all its inhabitants, the ancestral value of land. And the second, the community life. I am because we are. That's very, very essential. And an authoritarian system always destroys the community so that when you are isolated, you are really powerless and unable already to do anything. So let us remind that we are not state entities, but social beings. We are not individualistic humanoids, but social beings. We are not commodities for sale, but social beings. We are not owners of the earth, but social beings. Now, for those who are interested to go further in terms of theology, African theology, there are many very interesting theologians. Benezet Bujo, he wrote The Ethical Dimension of Community, the African model of the dialogue between the North and the South, and the foundation of African ethics beyond the universal claim of Watson. The main important idea of those books in theology, moral theology, is that humanism, the primary focus is on human beings, the welfare need, and the interest. Thank you.